Hello, good evening. Today we have the pleasure to interview Mr. Gregor Mendel, starting with the first question. Mr. Mendel, how can you describe your life focusing on your experiments?
Well, I'm Australian and I have contributed to understanding of heredity phenomena and the genetic factors that cause them. For example, before the results and laws that I create people believing in mixed heritage, which was very poor explanation of hereditary phenomena. This theory held, for the example, we cross a white cat with a black cat. That product will be a great cat. My life in relationship with my experiments is very unique. I was born on a rural environment, accusing my actual patient from the cross experiments that helped me for what I am today. I also attend my University of Vienna, where I discovered my ability for incremental crops and mix with my mathematical knowledge.
Thank you for your answer. And talking about experiments in agriculture, we know that you performed experiments with bees to contribute to the study of inheritance. Could you please give us some details about this?
It would be a pleasure. In my time, there used to be sellers who prized themselves on marketing prepared peas that showed unique and inherited features because of their genetically pure progenitors. And I used to buy these tips of seeds to make my experiments. I first performed a cross pollination between two pea plants with my pure characteristics. One only produced by purple flowers and the other one with only white ones. And I called this couple the parental generation. I later found out that all descendants of this cross were plants with only purples, who I called the first filiation generation. Of course, that subsequently I made the crossing of this generation, which I called the second filial generation. But surprisingly, I discovered that not all flowers were purple. Actually, approximately the 75% of the plants were kept with purple flowers, while the remaining manufactured wild flowers. This meant that for every three purple flowers, there were found a white one. So then, I decided to repeat the experiment with the 7 characteristic features of the pea plants. And in all the results, the proportion was maintained. So I conclude that even though only a single trait is expressed, in the F1 generation, the second trait doesn't disappear. It just hides to repeat in the F2 generation.
Well, that was a very cool answer. Now, Mr. Mendel, you're well known for your experiments in pea flowers. All the years of observation you spent led to the explanatory principles of inheritance, or laws of genetics, that you provided and that today are still relevant because of the impact these contributions have to science. Can you please explain to us what is about this first law of hybrid uniformity or dominance principle?
Of course, when I started doing my experiments, I took two different pea plants, both of pure race, but one was purple and the other was white. The interesting thing starts after I crossed them because the resulting plants were all purple. Before, I could only describe what I find allowed me. Now we own that each plant has two alleles, which may be dominant or recessive. Purple color was the dominant allele, and therefore all the resulting flowers were purple.
Oh, true. I do remember that. That means that the pure purple flower was a homozygous dominant organism, and the pure white flower was a homozygous recessive. So, when you cross them, you obtain a heterozygous organism.
Exactly. Heterogeneous organisms are also called hybrids, therefore the name of this law.
And what can you tell us about the law of character segregation?
Well, this was a cross of the resulting hybrids of this first filler generation. This gave birth to the second phyloid generation. Here, one of each four plants was white. I really like this law because I demonstrated that the idea of mixed varietate was wrong.
That is so interesting. Can you tell us where the name of this law comes from?
That is because each allele is segregated or separate to form four new allele combinations that express individual phenotypes for each member of the F2 generation.
Thank you, Mr. Mendel. Now we only have left the law of independent segregation of characters. As I have been told, the difference between this law and the previous two is that here you studied two phenotypes characteristics instead of one at a cross of hybrid organisms. What else can you tell us about this law?
Yes, what you say is true. This law establishes that all is chromosome of organisms are segregated independently of other alleles.
And how did you prove that?
I proved this with an experiment where I observed that the color of the flower were purple or white, and the color of the pod were green or yellow. The result basically showed that not because the plant was purple flowers, it must give green pods. That means, as the name said, that each segregation of characters is independent from the other.
Now, can you tell us a little bit about what you think about your discoveries?
Yes, of course. Since my work has been appreciated and studied after a long period of time, I have come to the conclusion that my work and dedication were simply too ahead of my time. By this, I mean it was too contrary to the beliefs of hereditary. But now, I can clearly see how it impacts in our scientific development, as we are now too able to predict and truly understand or analyze hereditary information. Talking about the basic laws of generic that I created, I can say I pulse a new way of student life and how it works and changes throughout the circumstances. I think I helped our society because I was able to understand how heredity functions. So in my modern studies, my laws and my experiments permit the development of treatments and disease. For example, cures for important diseases like yellow fever and measles have been found with the support of this science.
Thank you.
As a scientist, do you consider that there were some difficulties or issues in some of your discoveries?
Of course, most of the science in the research, for example. Nowadays, there is controversy in my experiment about the peace science scientists think that I published the data shown there, and also most of them do not consider my results.
What were some of the biases that the people or scientists in your field made in relation with your loss?
According to National Geographic, the first time I did my experiment, it could have been right. Nevertheless, since I could replicate the experiment and have a good results, I published my results very fast, so there were no contradictions and problems in my research.
Do you consider that there were social influences implying the cross-pollination experiment? And what were those influences and how did they influence?
Yes, at first I didn't had so much interest in my investigation plans, but my college Alexander Makowski gave me that the interest since he was a botanist, and I saw all that on what he was working on.
Well, that's all for this interview. It was a pleasure and an honor to have you here, Mr. Mendel, reminding that the main importance of your work has been fundamental to modern genetics, and your famous Mendelian genetics have managed to explain the transmission of genetic invariants from parents to children. Thank you very much.